Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Sonali, and I'll be your host. Please note that we can't hear you as you're on mute, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat window. We'll be addressing any of questions you have during an open Q&A session at the very end. So let's begin with an introduction of today's two speakers, Gary Steer and Olivier Reynaud. Would you like to start?
Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you're from. But my name is Gary Steer. I am relatively new to GSX, I don't even think 2 months in yet. I've known the company for 3 years, and I've worked with the products before, but I'm new to the team here. And I'll hand off here to Olivier, who's here with me.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Olivier Reynaud. I'm also located in Boston, and I'm a technical sales lead at GSX, and I've been there for several years now.
So I'm going to roughly take the first portion of this presentation. I think, to me, I always like to talk about where we came from, and because I think it really helps us influence what it is we're looking at, what has impacting us, what caused the problem or the situation that we're in. So for me, I think we're in the middle of an evolution of computing, to be honest. So in the beginning, this is our first computer. It's not exactly, but really the earliest computers were something along the lines of mainframes. And I think everyone attending would probably agree that we're somewhere in this transition, heading on to the cloud itself. That's really abbreviated, so let's take a slightly less abbreviated version of the history of computing. Back again, 500 BC was, at least according to Google, and everyone knows that the internet is true, so whatever I found on Wikipedia is guaranteed to be accurate. But the abacus was invented. I picked some selected history facts here. I think that selective history is the new trend in the U.S., so I like this one. Conrad Zuse, he created the Z1 in his parents' living room. That was actually the first computer capable of doing true binary, so those are ones and zeros. Move ahead a few years, IBM made a first what they call general purpose digital computer. I just kind of like this fact because it could do multiplication in 6 seconds, which was, I guess, fantastic at the time. So then we moved into the mainframe era, and the mainframe era is probably the first point where computers became stable, they became reliable. The reliability in mainframes, if you ever read back into or even look at some of the newer mainframes, they had components that were duplicated, triplicated. Failure, while I guess it's always possible, the probability was almost unheard of. It was truly incredible, the reliability that we picked up out of when we got to this mainframe point in time. Then we got into the 80s, and we started to see a shift into client-server computing. And I think this, to me, probably is where it begins to get into a bit more of the discussion that I think we're going to have now. But client-server computing, roughly defined, is a fat, heavier, bigger, more data, more code, more gigabytes, however you want to think of this, application that runs on the client side, and some portion of the data is kept on the server side. There's a lot of variance on this, and it truly is really unbelievable what counts as client server. But if something's kept on the server and you have a client application that runs on your end as well, then it became client server. Client server was the beginning of, I think, a change in the industry for me. What we saw come along was a point in time where people wanted less expensive hardware. We picked up an issue, though, where we had less redundancy. They had failures we didn't experience before. I remember when I first got into technology, I'd read these articles on people who kept servers in closets, for extended periods of time, where the closet had no ventilation. It was, 135 degrees Fahrenheit in this closet. And when you look at that, you really understood why things would fail. I also remember when I first got into computers and technology, the quality variance. We'd have large enterprises where Joe from accounting and I apologize for any Joes in the call, it wasn't you. Joe from accounting would create an application that somehow became a line of business app. It was not professionally developed. It was it just meant to fit a purpose or fit a need, but it was there and people counted on it and people needed it, and because it was so easy to build this half client, half server based application, it was tremendously troublesome. They would break, things would go down, but we had to know that they were up and they were working. So with client server, we ended up in this world where tracking the health of both the hardware and the software, it was a key requirement. You can't do your job in an enterprise if you don't know things are functioning. It became commonplace for a part of what we do. So I think to me that kind of prompted the question of, why did we change? If client server was less reliable, why did we make this switch? And the answer is, simple. Humans, people, all of us. This may, seem a little superficial, but it looks matter when it comes to technology. People are drawn to applications that are well designed and look nice. The old mainframe green screens, particularly in the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't a pretty wrapper to go around, CICS or whatever it is you may be running. You had to know F3, R7, Alt-X to move through the screens. They were difficult to use. They weren't nice to look at. There was no easy way to do your job. So when somebody came along with this, pretty application that ran in Windows 3.1, it was fantastic. And it really drew people to want more of that and less of these hard-to-use applications where they had to remember key sequences. Also, mainframes, because of the reliability and stability, they were unbelievably expensive. Small companies could never afford them. Sometimes they could afford to buy into timeshare is what comes to mind. That's probably not the right term, but you could buy a piece of the processing functionality, but it probably still never met your need, and a small business could never afford it. Also, mainframes were really built for very specific tasks, and people were wanting more. We were seeing computers. We knew what we could do with them. We wanted more things, and mainframes weren't built for that, primarily, because stable, reliable code that doesn't break takes a long, long time to develop. So we got to the point where we were wanting things developed faster, wanting things made quicker, and as a result, client-server computing fit in this space as well. But humans, by us wanting all of these things, we literally, at least in my opinion, I think that this switch, kind of created the on-premises monitoring world. And I know that mainframe vendors, the IBMs of the world, the digital equipment, back in the day, yes, they monitored all of their equipment, they monitored all of their mainframes, they knew what was taking place, but because we didn't really have those systems in our companies in the early days, no one really monitored those things. And now we had these things. We had applications that could crash. Things were not great. They didn't work very good. So as a result, we had to start watching the applications and the servers. And when we, I'm kind of lumping all of us into this statement here, but we learned to solve problems by fixing something on the server. And there's a, in that second bullet, I actually call out the fact that we delivered a positive user experience by solving problems directly on the server. It's kind of like, I've used this analogy before, but there's if a pipe breaks or I've got a leaky pipe in my bathroom and I fix it, if it leaks a second time, I know what it was. I know right where it is. I know right what to go back to because I've been there. I've seen it. I have experience with that particular issue, the resolution, and how to get back to it. So we learned to watch counters. We learned to watch for the leaks and sometimes literally memory leaks, I guess. But we learned to watch for these problems because it gave us the ability to go back, see something, where the old saying, wherever there's smoke, there's fire. We knew there was a problem. So we became accustomed to watching counters, watching knobs and dials, as I tend to kind of say these days, but watch these counters because we knew what that counter would translate into from the user experience standpoint, and we were used to fixing problems on the server. That's it's a great model to in some environments, if you really know your equipment, if you really know what's, you know, how they're built, how they run, I know certainly I knew the servers I built really well, but what happens with that model when we go to the cloud? You know, then what do we do? And I think for me, the current dilemma that we have is IT admins, they are no longer able to fix server-side issues for users that run an application that's hosted in the cloud. And, you know, I would challenge everyone listening in, you may not have noticed it at first, but sincerely, we learned to actually solve problems by fixing things on the server. That's why we look at counters. It's why we look at, you know, the knobs and dials. It's why we have some we want alerts on and we don't want alerts on others. We knew which counters mattered. That's how we learned to fix things. Unfortunately, in the cloud, if we're talking Office 365, we do not have access to these counters, nor will we ever. You know, we get pieces of access. Microsoft gives us some insight to what's happening, insight they think is necessary for us to understand, but it's because they're the ones who are fixing the server-side problems. They're the ones who are resolving issues on that end. They're no longer our counters to look at. They're Microsoft's counters to look at this point in time. I think the second big thing that really fed into this cloud dilemma, Microsoft has done a fantastic job, particularly with Exchange. It's getting better with some of the other workloads, but with Exchange, that transition to the cloud has gotten so smooth with the newest Outlook clients, and Microsoft deserves kudos. You know, quite honestly, I know people on the hybrid team very well, and I think they've done a phenomenal job at building this out and making it to where users have the least impact of a transition that you could possibly imagine. When I first started doing cloud migrations, this was painful, and now it's smooth. It's really simple. People don't necessarily know that they got moved to the cloud. Yes, they may have seen it on paper, but they may have read the email. They may have not read the email warning them or telling them. But aside from you know, the fact that it was there, it doesn't really settle in because this was smooth. It looks the same way it looked. It runs the same way it used to run, as far as they can tell on day one. You know, maybe day two, but you know, as we get down the road, we have a third problem here, which is all of us are still held accountable for performance, including, you know, lack of performance. And then, you know, to be blunt, the reason we're held accountable, well, this is what users think we do all day. You know, actually, I kind of always have like loved this image. I don't know why, but the idea of like, you know, bumbling Homer Simpson, sleeping on a nuclear console, waiting for the, you know, lights to go off and something to die. I have had end users say to me in the past that, well, you know, what are you doing? Asking me a question like that when I couldn't solve a ticket right away. I do a lot of things. We don't sleep on the console. We let the console sit there by itself until it starts beeping because we have work to do. So the real problem, though, is this. Users continue to create tickets. I think if there's probably one of the most important things to understand about how we got here and why I've been very quickly here trying to, you know, spit out my history of the computing universe. People learned, you know, that applications break. They learned that we can fix them by opening support tickets with us. So the problem is people still open tickets. You know, you know, when Outlook feels slow. And to me, I want to make sure, you know, when you see the word feel, that's there on purpose. They think Outlook is slow. They feel it's slow. That's an emotional statement, and emotion comes into here. We're all human. They're going to open a ticket. You know, when they feel that OneDrive downloaded that image slowly today, they're going to open a ticket. If they feel that, you know, Joe in accounting was slow to respond to the instant message, maybe because Joe was at the copier, but it may also be that they just didn't realize how fast it did or did perform yesterday. Anytime a user feels that something is different, truthful or not, they're going to open tickets. They are. They learned this in the client-server model. So the idea that you're going to get rid of support tickets when you go to the cloud is completely and totally inaccurate. And I know here at GSX, and I know from customers I migrated to Office 365 along the way, they may have thought that initially. I think they learned that it's, quite honestly, a change in the paradigm that we're going to be up against. Tickets don't go away. They still come in. So the new paradigm, and I hope that everyone believes or reads into this and really looks through the kind of tickets that you're getting in your environment. But we kind of call this cloud frame because in reality, we evolved from mainframe to client server. Well, it's I've seen articles, and I think it might have been a Wired magazine or one of the other industry publications, but it said, are we back to mainframe 2.0? And the reality is, no, we're not. We're in a new paradigm, and the reason that it's a different paradigm is, mainframe wasn't about having an application that the user ran. So the very first most important bullet that you have to understand, and this is what differentiates this from the mainframe days, we now have full-featured client applications that are running. So you have a client end. So maybe it's not CloudFrame, maybe it's client mainframe, but it's different than it used to be. These full-featured client applications look just like the on-premises version. As a matter of fact, Outlook is identical. So users don't really understand that we've returned to an environment where we can't fix things. It's not our system to fix anymore. And as a result, I think that the admin's job has been changed. I honestly would probably rate those 3 bullets in a 1, 2, 3 sequence. Managing user expectation. I am sorry if people don't want that to be their job at this point in time, but you can spend more time on the right things, on the tasks you want to do, if you manage the user's expectation. And kind of to the sub-bullet beneath it, in this new paradigm, managing expectation is the single greatest way you can be successful. I used to do, and still do a little here and there, but I spent a lot of time doing domino migrations to Exchange on-prem, Exchange Online, early versions, and then into Office 365. Managing expectation is the only thing that really mattered for making an entire user population successful and making the migration successful. Yes, we could absolutely go ahead and get the data migration right, take a few passes, work through it, resolve issues. The technical stuff was the easiest. People were always the hardest, and managing a transition is difficult. In this new paradigm, managing user expectation is the single most important way to be successful. It is, without exception. And that's why I kind of ask, the last question here, how can you manage the user's expectation on how fast a meeting request should be? How fast should it show me free busy if I don't know? And, I'll turn it over to Olivier to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, so we have a few examples that we have prepared for you, and those are real case client examples. So first one we wanted to show you, to demonstrate a bit that example, was an example we helped a bank migrate from on-premise Exchange to the cloud. So they had multiple branch offices. So what we've done is that we have looked at provided facts on what was the end user experience on premises and in the online environment before, during, and after the migration. And we were able to compare that user experience for the different actions that end user would perform in their Outlook client. And so the end results, you might not be that surprised, was that yes, the cloud was slower than the on-premises. And what was surprising is that depending on each of the actions, it could be dramatically slower. If we take a look at opening the mailbox, so basically contacting Exchange, authenticating, and retrieving the different inbox properties, this was around like 70 milliseconds on premises and 500 milliseconds in the cloud, so about 7 times slower, where on some of the actions like creating a new email, it was like 50% slower on the cloud. So it's very important, it's critical to have visibility on each of those actions, because maybe opening a mailbox, making the connections will be okay, but if creating a meeting takes too long, it exceeds the expectation of the user, then they're going to open that support ticket, as we mentioned.
And one thing I know from when Olivier showed me these facts, I know from domino migrations I did, people would open the mailbox, go get a cup of coffee, walk away. So although that one is a staggering time, the tiny green bar, big blue bar, we would get the complaints on creating a meeting execution or finding somebody in the address book. And if you look, those two are really the ones that have that big gap in there. So yeah, when you're looking at this, you can't just look at something that says, oh, I can connect to the cloud. Oh, I can open the mailbox. You need to know more detail. You've got to look at what's actually happening.
Yeah, you have to have facts on each of those actions. And because for each of those actions, there's a specific threshold, what we like to call the user threshold, which is really critical. Is that threshold below which the user is fine? It's matching his expectation of performing that action in his clients. But above that threshold, this is where it's gonna be bothered. He's gonna start complaining. He might open some support tickets. So you need to be able to measure what is the action taking, how long it's taking, and measuring it against that user threshold. And Microsoft has ensured that the performance of the different action is satisfying to the end user. But before, you might have a big gap that you could play with. Now that gap has been reduced. So anything that will impact a specific action might bring those specific end users above their user threshold. So it's really important that you have those metrics to understand where the experience is comparatively to the user's threshold. That will enable you to distinguish the fact from the emotion, to understand when they feel it's slow, is it really slower than usual? Is it exceeding that user threshold?
So there's actually on this emotion one, and quick example from my migration days, but I had a migration project where, and I got in my head was 4,500, maybe 5,000 seats, but so medium-sized company, upper end of medium, but we did a migration. There were some people with issues. We'd done a large batch. It was actually an entire office, I think about 1,000 users, and we had a couple dozen issues that we knew there'd be some trouble. People who were traveling, we couldn't get their laptops in advance, so the customer knew we'd have the due diligence issues there because we identified them, and these users were down. We were working getting their laptops fixed. A secretary came to me and said, that her new mail was terrible. I said, what's broken? And she said, well, nothing's broken. It's just slow. And I don't have time for this. And I said, okay, we'll get back to you. And we got through the day. I didn't make it back over to her. We got these 25, the issues that we knew were going to have. We got them fixed, got all these laptops patched, updated, whatever the problem was. We thought it was a great day. And on Monday morning, the project was on hold, and we were going to be fired. It turns out that when we did a bit of digging on what took place, this company was still at the point that it wasn't publicly traded. It was still privately owned, second generation. The CEO, owner, of the company, the secretary was his mom. And at Sunday dinner, mom said, this new thing is terrible. I can't do my job. And so the CEO froze the entire project that night. And Monday morning, we were in hot water. It worked out fine once we really got to the fact that it was mom who opened up the ticket, was complaining at Sunday dinner, but talk about emotion getting in the way. I mean, it was a son getting his mother upset, freezing an entire project with no facts whatsoever. It worked out great for us. We really had a smooth migration for the rest of the project because it was a tremendous embarrassment for the company, the client's company. But emotion gets into this stuff fast. It really, really does. If you think you can live on just data and facts, you've got to really start to pay attention to what we're being held accountable for these days. All of us who work in this new world.
Yeah, humans are really driving those applications.
If we could just get rid of the humans, it'd be great.
So, on top of those different actions, what we've noticed is that every location matters. Too often we hear, but it works fine for me here in Boston or wherever you're seated. No, you can't assume that it works fine for the other's location if it works for you. If you want to be managing the user expectation, you need to understand exactly what they are experiencing, wherever they are located. So sometimes I hear, well, we're just going to be monitoring from headquarters. Everybody connects to headquarters and then breaks out to the internet. No, there's going to be a huge difference. You can't even be monitoring just from Azure. There's a huge difference from what you're going to be monitoring there. This is the ideal point of view. So you need visibility in each of those different user locations. It's critical that you understand what they are experiencing from where they are. Another example I had the other day is we deployed some monitoring for the different locations for a large company with multiple branch offices, and they realized that they had very different user experience in those locations. And so they had a tenant based in North America, and all their APAC users had a really bad experience compared to headquarters. But what turned out to be is that they couldn't just have one threshold, or they couldn't compare those facts in the same way. Headquarters would complain when we would take 600 milliseconds to open a mailbox, where in APAC it would generally take about 2 seconds to open a mailbox and perform any actions. So you really need to have visibility in each of those locations because users have different expectations. So you need to be able to compare those the facts with those expectations to understand about their emotions and what they're going to be feeling.
One thing I want to just kind of throw in. But you saw on the first slide, I'm sure you've seen some of the marketing stuff, but I've got a long history with Microsoft. I've got an extremely rare Microsoft certification and a Microsoft MVP. So it means that I, talk about the things or write about, help people with, the things Microsoft is looking to focus on. So I have a bias towards Microsoft. I think that Office 365 is probably one of the best platforms that's ever been built technologically. From what I know through some of the, people I know on the back end, it is incredible. It doesn't go down, it doesn't break. Yes, there are some small issues here and there because they're rolling code out quickly, that's what people want these days, but mass outages don't happen. So when you go to the portal and you see that, no users are impacted, inside of that bubble, inside of the Office 365 data center, it is running incredibly. But we don't live in that bubble. We don't. So yes, Microsoft is providing us true detail on what the back end is saying. The problem is there are a lot of layers in between us and what is actually inside of the Office 365 environment.
Yeah, and so to demonstrate that point, what we've been doing is that we deployed different robot users. We've deployed one in Azure, and we've deployed one in an Office location to show you a little bit how they compare. So what we're looking at right now is the G6 Gizmo dashboard, where you can see results. You can have dashboards like this showing the different facts for each of those locations. So what we're looking at right now is a robot user we've deployed in Azure, so inside of that bubble, as Gary mentioned. So you can see the different checks that we're doing. We aggregate everything for the network, the end user experience. Here are the different actions that are running. So right now, everything runs fine. What is interesting to look at here?
One thing, hang on, Olivia, I just want to interject. I think it's obvious we're not just showing product, because I think we're talking about the problems we believe in. A robot user is really it's an 8 megabyte. I guess you could call it a remote probe if you want it, but it's capable of a lot more. So that's what this is running. I actually have a VM in Azure that is being told every user experience test we want to run. And that's the data that we have up here. I just wanted to call it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Gary, for doing that. So yes, what we've seen and what we wanted to show you is that this robot user that is constantly using the client application as a user to open the mailbox, create different items, we can see here the different results. So of course we do some network checks to allow you to understand and troubleshoot when issues might be impacted from a network perspective. So what we can see here is that in Azure, so for the network, network, we see it around like 20, 40 milliseconds for the round trip. For opening the mailbox, it's right around 500 milliseconds. At best, it goes as low as 100. We have peaks at 1 second, but it stays in a really good end-user experience. Anything under a second is usually pretty good. And we can see the different actions as well. You can see some peaks as well, but really what we identify here is that we have a good experience here. You could easily run, well, I think you did that test, run online mode for Outlook directly from Azure, and of course it's going to perform very fine. To compare that with, we have here a normal remote location that is running. We can see round trip time takes more around 40 to 60 milliseconds to run, and here I've isolated only the open mailbox. You can see baseline is more around 1 second. We have peaks up to 3 seconds. So we see a huge difference here. So you need to be able to understand that user experience for those remote locations. You can't just be monitoring from that ideal bubble, otherwise you're not going to see anything. As Gary said, the cloud's running fine. They've made a tremendous job on making that platform reliable and ensuring that the performance was satisfying out of this data center. But you need to be able to know from each of the locations how it performs. And one of the reasons you need that is that there are multiple components that are involved. Every location has multiple layers it needs to go through to connect to that. A statement that we often discuss is that to this day, we don't know any enterprise that's full cloud. Every cloud deployment is actually a hybrid deployment. You always have an Active Directory on premises. You always have the Azure AD Connect to make the synchronization of those accounts with the cloud. Very often, you're federating the different applications through ADFS proxies, or other federation application. Most of the deployments that we see out there, they still have an on-premises Exchange or SharePoint server for either hosting mailboxes or at least for the administration. So it's very important that you understand and you monitor each of those different components, because those network configuration, they can impact the end user experience.
So this actually is a internal marketing slide that on my first interview here, I kind of mocked, and I said, look, this stuff is crushing the users. but you know, the honest reality is it can crush your users. I mean, it's funny that I would mock it from that one angle, but it's exactly what I would want to show here. There is a lot you may be running that is in the way. You have to understand all of this stuff. You have to understand what's the impact if I have a proxy server or if I don't. And that one, you know, I have seen that impact beyond anything you could ever imagine. It can just have a tremendous impact. And tremendous troubleshooting impact too. Microsoft makes one minor change in the code and all of a sudden your proxy is a nightmare, but on selected tasks. I mean, I've literally seen it cause an issue on selected tasks in production environments. So you've got to know everything that's out there. And as Olivier mentioned, you know, I say that a hybrid, you know, a pure cloud for and a large enterprise is a fallacy. We all need something on premises, and I think it makes better sense to keep something on premises. The level of on-premises varies with every company, and country too, actually.
Yeah, so this you have to have visibility on that, because you're still responsible and fine-tuning, configuring, administrating those different systems that can impact that user experience. So it's critical to have visibility on those. And I'm happy to show you another example. What we have here is, let me go through the demo. We have configured a robot user again, so that light probe performing the different client tests. One is actually going through a proxy to connect out to the internet and to Office 365 services, and one is going without any proxy. What was interesting to notice here is that, so the two robot users are running similar kind of tests. We see here, again, the network latency. We don't really see a difference. See here is going around 60 milliseconds for round trip. Same here. So from a network perspective, it's pretty impossible to say if end users are impacted.
And they're on the same network, so we would expect tests that won't trigger a proxy. So, basic pings, trace route, things like that, they're going to work fine. They're not going to go through a proxy that requires authentication prior to going to Office 365, which again is why basic, connectivity testing does you no good. Trying what a user does, that's what matters.
Indeed, and so that's where you can actually see the differences for the individual actions. So it doesn't impact all the actions, but here, for example, we can see a peak on a specific date that impacted opening the mailbox, creating the email. Resolve user had a huge peak. I can remove this to focus a little bit. This peak was caused by the proxy, because when we look at the exact same probe that was not going through the proxy, we can't see anything that high. There are some peaks here and there going about a second, but nothing that exceeds the 2 seconds that we see here.
3-second peak. I mean, it's again, something that high, you'll get complaints. And in this particular case, it went through an authenticated proxy. So, that particular, call, whatever Outlook was doing in the background, made the proxy, I would presume, re-authenticate. But again, I'm presuming because I haven't read through all the data, checked everything down, but we can see what task caused it and then start to dig in from there, because we know that in this case, the proxy had an impact.
And in fact, it's some actions, but not all of them, because we can see here checking the FreeBSD status was fine.
And ironically, if you look at even some of the other actions, it looks a lot more like linear and flat for some of the others compared to, what we see without the proxy. Again, maybe it makes some things better, maybe it makes some things worse, but we actually have to gather the data in order to know this. I think the big point here is there's a difference, so if you've got a proxy server in your environment, it has an impact. It causes a difference, maybe good in some points and maybe bad in other points.
So just to recap here a little bit what we showed you. So you have to have facts. Facts is the key requirement to understand and to manage that end user, those users' expectations. And those facts, they are critical on each and every action of the different products. So we focused here on Exchange actions, but it's valid for SharePoint, for Skype for Business Online, any workload that you're using out of Office 365. And those facts, not only they count for every action, every product, but they are different in every location. Those facts are different, but especially the expectations from the users that you have that have been accustomed to use a service from a remote location. So you need to have those facts for every single location because they have different expectations, because they go through different network components as well. So each and every of those network components, you need to have visibility on those, understand how they are currently impacting protocols that are used by the various applications that you're running, the different clients that they're using for Outlook, for OneDrive, accessing SharePoint. And only once you have those facts, you can actually separate the emotions and perceptions that is fed back from those different users that might cause those support tickets that you still need to manage. Those support tickets are coming to you. They're not going anywhere else, or they're not, certainly not to Microsoft. They're coming to you, escalating to your team. So it's really important to have those facts to understand what's going on, be able to manage their expectation and separate that from the facts.
No, I was going to say is, I've done, the notes migrations that I used to do, and long before coming here, I'd use GSX software to watch how long these tasks took. We talk about managing user expectations. It was a lot easier if I knew this is how something should behave. When you understand, when you have a position of confidence, and you can tell, explain to your users that this is how it'll be. But look at all the great stuff we picked up, because the reality is the cloud's given us a lot of great things. Hard outages don't happen anymore. I mean, users, I actually think, anymore, 99.9999999% uptime is it's the entry price. Any cloud app that goes down is done. So, that's not going to happen. I was looking at up, down. It doesn't make sense anymore. Basic, can I, connect to the cloud? if you can't connect, it's something in your environment, but it's not where the issues come from. Large-scale outages are easy to fix. It's understanding the minutiae, the things that are really small, the minor changes. We used to be able to just tell in these migrations that it was different company by company. As Olivier mentioned, they knew some of these offices had a better tolerance for slower than others, but we would get to know that at the company X, when this task took around 500 milliseconds, we'd start to see tickets. So as we saw it approaching that, we would have support people on the ground just to walk around, train people, help them understand what they could do. Maybe this would make it work a little better. It was helping them understand what to expect, so they knew this was the new normal, because they're used to on-premises. Unfortunately, we have made decisions. Either executives have made them for us, or we as executives have made them, but decisions have been made that security and stability are the most important, and that cost is, these transactions take longer and we have less control of them. We just have to help our users understand that this is what's going to take place. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be bad all the time. Once they understand, they settle in. But if you don't ever get control of that, if you don't actually be able, if you're not actually able to understand what is normal and what's not, you can't make them confident that this is how it should be. And people end up really uncomfortable every time a ticket comes in. Another one on this. How do we deal with it? Know what the facts are, and then once we do, we're able to then help our users understand this is normal or it's not normal, and we are very happy to go back to the ISP vendor, the network team who may need to do something with the proxy, to Microsoft if it's something with Microsoft. Yesterday, a perfect example of understanding exactly what has to happen. I was screaming about this on Twitter and a few other places, but go into Office 365 groups, made a new meeting for my team, click the button that says add a Skype meeting, it disappears. And I mean, like, it shows up for a second and the meeting deleted itself. And I replicated this and recorded it 50 times. So if someone from Microsoft is on, you'd like to see it, I've got it recorded. But if I did not click that Skype for Business meeting button, the meeting stayed on the group calendar. Again, you have got to know exactly what's happening. And because I did know what was happening and I was able to see that if this is on and this is off in scenario A versus scenario B, I knew right where the problem was. Imagine trying to do that kind of support without understanding the precise impact of, did we try it with this option in one scenario and did we try it without that option the second time? You would never be able to tell the difference. You have to have that level of detail, and then you can fight for your users, and you can also help them understand, when they shouldn't be fighting, to be honest. So unfortunately, we are way over on time, probably because I think we talked too much, but I think we're good fun to listen to. I hope you did too. What we're going to do is gather all the inbound questions. We'll write up responses to them and send them back out to the attendees. So if anyone who came in, like I said, we'll put answers into the questions and just send them back out. That way, we're not taking up any more of your time since we're a full 45 minutes in here. But you'll still be able to see the questions that other attendees ask and get the answers.
Yeah, and an evaluation is about to show up in your browser, so just take a moment and please provide us with your feedback. That would be really great for us, and that's pretty much a wrap. So thanks again, and have a really great day.
Yes, thank you very much all.